Jennifer Walters has arrived to the MCU, and spoiler alert, I'm already obsessed with her. Hey y'all, today we are reviewing the very first episode of She-Hulk Attorney at Law, which dropped on Disney Plus today, Marvel's newest series. I'm happy to report that I loved this first episode. The legal aspect, the breaking of the fourth wall, made for a really swift and efficient first episode. I think Marvel continues to improve on their first episodes of these TV shows. We all talked about Ms. Marvel a couple weeks ago, which is wild. These first episodes keep getting better. They keep feeling more balanced. They keep progressing the plot quicker. They're just much more efficient storytelling devices. So I want to give it up for Marvel for, sticking the landing, in my opinion, on the last two TV shows, at least with these first episodes. I just really like the comedy style of this show. And this is something that I've already seen some critics online who were able to see up to the first 4 episodes. I, for disclaimer, have only seen the first episode. I've seen some people complain about the humor maybe not landing for them. And I think comedy is something that it's not going to make sense to everyone. I mean, a lot of people love The Office, but there's still people out there that dislike that style of mockumentary cringe type humor, and that's completely understandable. Thus far, a lot of the things that I giggled at were kind of like references to other pieces of media, like the reference to Inside Out and Bing Bong, and to Steve Rogers, all the jokes there, which who do we think it was? Because I don't think it was Peggy. So who was it? Leave your guesses in the comments down below. But things like that I think are really funny because it makes it a reward and a laugh for people who are kind of like paying attention to the rest of like the media landscape, whether that be Marvel itself or Pixar, Disney, any of their other properties, that sort of thing. I also think this is a really great way to introduce us to Jennifer Walters because Jennifer has a much different approach to her life, but also being a Hulk than Bruce did. Bruce is a very serious type person. He's a scientist first, and now he's a Hulk kind of by circumstance. He is trying to, of course, still take this kind of the serious way, take out his like journal and explain to Jennifer everything she's going to go through and what changes might happen with being the Hulk and how to control it. And I like that we're not going through the same steps as Hulk before. I feel like depending on how canon you consider the Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton in it a part of the MCU, it definitely technically is a part of it. However, I like that this show is taking a different approach. It's not necessarily so serious, and there's not necessarily a battle between Hulk and person and that sort of thing. I will say the one thing that was slightly disappointing in this episode, in my opinion, was the fact that the whole blood transfusion thing did not necessarily like create such a momentous moment. So of course in the episode they come across the Sicarian cruiser and they get in a car crash, and then Jennifer has one big gash on her arm, but that's it. No other marks really. And then Bruce seems virtually unharmed other than the fact that he's bleeding, and then his blood lands on Jennifer's arm and of course goes into her bloodstream, and all that gamma radiation and all that good stuff that makes Bruce Banner the Hulk is now Jennifer. And I do like the genetic similarity still being a part of this storyline as to the reason why Jennifer is able to kind of process the gamma radiation rather than it being a lethal dose. It just wasn't a big enough moment for me, if I'm being completely honest. I just felt like it was too convenient, too easy, and Bruce is just like, the first time he's like, get away from me, I'm bleeding, Jennifer is already done for. So it's like she never really stood a chance of not becoming She-Hulk, but I also feel like the car crash was a pretty momentous car crash. I also really love that this story, even though being primarily focused on Jennifer Walters and her journey being a Hulk, I love that we're getting to see more of Bruce Banner because of legal rights and who owns Hulk and that sort of thing. We haven't gotten any sort of solo time with Bruce. He's always been in a team-up movie or an Avengers movie, and a lot of times he's Hulk. Getting to see him in this more comfortable version of himself and kind of accepting who he is and both sides of him is really fun, but also getting to hear about like his memories with Tony of building his kind of hideout in Mexico and the bar, which has of course the little Bruce Banner initials and Tony Stark initials carved into it, was so precious. It was really nice getting to hear those stories of Bruce and how like he does have a personal relationship with these people who like now are not a part of his life, and that's why he's potentially clinging on so hard to being Jennifer's mentor as a Hulk, because that's kind of all he has. I also loved the reference to Natasha singing the lullaby and how he's like, yeah, that never really made sense to me, like why that worked, because of course it's like a wink at the viewers who are like, we never really addressed that again other than Thor referencing it. But again, it's become a joke within the fandom, and so I love that the writers have now incorporated that anytime Bruce shows up on screen. I also really love that there's a difference of opinion between Bruce and Jennifer on heroism and what it should look like, and if you have these powers, what your responsibility is with them, and of course how that ties back to Jennifer and her understanding of the law. And this is where I'm so excited that we already know that Matt Murdock is showing up as Daredevil later in the season, because this kind of conflict between Jennifer and Bruce really reminds me of the conversations between Frank Punisher and Matt Daredevil in season 2 of Daredevil, because they both are vigilantes, and even though Daredevil looks poorly upon Punisher in the way he's choosing to handle things with a lot of violence and potentially doing things out of his own personal spite, he's technically doing the exact same things that Matt's doing. And I'm so excited because I also really like how, especially when you take something like the law, being a lawyer, and comparing that to being a superhero, those two things may both seem to be going towards the goal of justice, but as a superhero, you have different people to answer to for superhero acts than you do as a lawyer, and vice versa. Like, there's laws and stuff, but superheroes tend to go around those. And so basically what I'm saying is I love this juxtaposition that this show is already putting out there to be explored, because I think that creates a lot of really great internal conflict for Jennifer that's going to be externalized through her physical transformation as a Hulk and her public job as a lawyer. But maybe one of my favorite moments of the entire show, and one of them that just feels like an attention to detail and making Jennifer Walters a real character and not just a female version of a Bruce Banner character, which of course is what's so important about her comics, is taking off the shoes in the courtroom before she hulks out. The fact that her friend reminds her to do that, and she makes the comment about not wanting to tear up her outfit, I loved it so much. The last thing I was going to mention is how I have been venturing into the She-Hulk comics themselves. I may have presented to the court the evidence. I love that this series is taking both the breaking of the fourth wall and the self-awareness of being a comic book character, as well as a comic book line in the MCU, in the Sacred Timeline, that is referenced here. There are comics actually within the character's world that are based on real life events for them. So based on Captain America, say there's Captain America comics that She-Hulk herself could read. And so when she's talking to Bruce and says, "Did you just reference a comic? Did you just like quote a comic book?" I feel like that's what they're referencing. So I love a good reference to the comics. And it's something that I never appreciated in the early days of the MCU, but now as we expand further and further, I can. And now I'm just sitting and waiting for next week, because I'm so excited to get more of Jennifer Walters and see more of her adventures as She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Please also like this video if you enjoyed this review, and please consider subscribing, because I will be doing weekly She-Hulk reviews as well as other reviews in this same format for movies and television, so you're not going to want to miss any of that content. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day or night whenever you're getting to watch this, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, y'all.